So, Mary Kay, one of the big tasks here for Ventrone is going to be this kicker that the Browns have invested a lot of. I mean, a fourth round pick for a kicker is a huge investment, and they need him to be successful, and they cannot lose games because of Cade York this year. How does when we talk about him, obviously we talk about the coverage units, we talk about all of those things, but really a lot of this is about Cade York. How do you think he helps in that regard?
Well, I think the first thing that we should try to find out is, how did he take Chase McLaughlin from making only 4 of 10 kicks from 40 to 49 yards last year in Cleveland? And then under Bubba Ventrone this past year, he made 9 of 11 from that distance. Okay. So obviously indoors, different situation. That has a lot to do with everything. But I think it's probably more than that. Bubba maybe identified something that was going wrong. I don't know what happened, but that's pretty damn significant to go from 4 of 10 to 9 of 11 from that distance. And that's the reason why, obviously, Chase McLaughlin is not in Cleveland anymore and Cade York is here, because of that particular chunk of field goals, that 4 of 10, because he could make them from 50 plus. He was making them from 50 plus like crazy. Couldn't make 40 to 49, and he was gone. And then he goes over there, and somehow they figured it out. I don't know how they did it, but I think it's a good sign for Cade York, because Cade York's issue last year, as we all know, in addition to having 3 kicks blocked, and they're going to have to figure that out. But in addition to that, he struggled at home, making only 10 of 16 field goals at First Energy Stadium. I think Bubba is going to dig into that and fix it. And he has to. He's got to figure that out. But he knows what it's like to play at First Energy Stadium. He knows what those winds are like. He played there for 4 years. So he knows all about that. I mean, I'm sure he will have ideas and things that he can do to get Cade York up to where he needs to be, because like you mentioned, that is vitally important for the special teams. They've got to fix that. They've got to get him up and running again and, on a trajectory actually towards a Pro Bowl. I mean, when you draft a kicker that high, you expect that he's going to be in a Pro Bowl over the next 3 or 4 years. So that's really the goal. And I think that, I think Bubba's going to be really good for him.
Mary Kay, as you were talking, I started to think about this. Who Bubba Ventrone was teammates with, and who he probably has a really strong relationship with, and probably could say, hey, buddy, why don't you give my kicker a call and talk to him? And, hey, kicker, why don't you listen to this guy? Because I played with him, and he was really good. Does this open up maybe some more lines of communication to Phil Dawson? I
think so. I really do think so. And I think it should. I think there might be a reach back to a little bit of Josh Cribbs for something. There might be a little bit of a reach back to Phil Dawson for something, right? So, yeah, I definitely think that, that there will be some of that from Bubba Ventrone. And I think there should be. Now, for whatever reason, Cade York seemed somewhat reluctant in the past. I don't know what it was, but I mean, he didn't seem to be like overly eager to reach out to Phil. I think he got sick and tired of us asking about it. I think if he was going to hear one more Phil Dawson question from us, his brain was going to just explode. But there's a whole lot to be learned from a guy like that. Playing the angles, playing the wind down at First Energy Stadium. And I do think that, it would be a really smart thing to do.
And Ashley, you're our Cade York whisperer.
Yes.
Obviously, look, we haven't talked to Bubba yet. We haven't had a chance to. Mary Kay has met him. You and I have not. But I mean, how do you think this impacts Cade?
I mean, I think for me, kind of going back to that, the Phil Dawson thing is interesting. Number one, right? Because that is, in theory, like we're talking about, another avenue for that connection to grow. And I mean, I know Cade talked to him like once or twice, it sounded like. And like Mary Kay said, I think he just was hesitant to be compared to Phil too early on and wants to be his own person, which I get. But I think you don't want to be so independent to the point that you're not getting, all the help from this very successful person who had to kick in this very difficult place that you can. So I am curious if that's part of it. But I think, too, with Cade, and he's admitted this, the biggest blocks for him were mental, and it was focusing too much on technique. Now, Mike Prefer talked about that, I think, like midway through the season, about he's such a perfectionist. You don't want him so focused on that all the time. I think that was a lesson that was kind of hard for Cade to learn, and it was part of his adjustment. But it seemed like over the last 3 games, he didn't miss a kick. He talked to me like before those games and said he kind of had identified the problem. And I think he took some steps to fixing it. Now, I think it's a matter of, can he fix it in bigger games? And like Mary Kay said, make those kicks more consistently at home, because some of those misses he had were so bad. I think of like the one against the Bucks where it was so wide left, it missed the net behind the goalpost. Those kind of misses aren't anything with his technique. He works too hard on it. It's mental at that point. So I think having a new coordinator in Bubba Ventrone, a guy who was so well respected on special teams, who's been there, who's a bit more of a fiery personality, like all of those things, I think can help him maybe get out a little bit of that perfectionist headspace. Just listening to a guy who's kind of, not at that position, but been there, done that for the Browns too, in this stadium, like Mary Kay said.